Hey, this is Decide This, and this is kind of a response to a video by Zephyrnix, but this is not one of those I'm going to own Zephyrnix videos or whatever. I'm just going to state a few things. First of all, I'm going to state that the iOS devices, pretty much all of them now, from the iPad to the iPod Touch and the iPhone, all have gyroscopes and accelerometers in them. And secondly, I'm going to also state that Sony six-axis controller was it's a gyroscope, but it was developed by Sony themselves, and they developed it themselves to get away from certain patent rights, so they wouldn't have to pay any kind of patents for it. And it's not well designed, basically. But they made it themselves to ignore certain patents. And the thing is that nowadays, and yeah, the Wiimotes had gyroscoping, but to balance it out, they put that camera in there to help balance it out, and it oddly enough worked. But now, a really good balance between a gyroscope and is to pretty much add an accelerometer, and you'll get a really good balance into it. And with Nintendo's new Classic Controller Pro and their pad, it's pretty much a done deal. Since Nintendo's going to use the same gyroscope that they used on their Wiimotes, and if they just all they have to do is just add an accelerometer to it, and they'll have a much more better balance than what Sony had. I know Sony didn't have an accelerometer, but they also put in a very, very shitty gyroscope in there, and that's why Sony's six-axis controllers couldn't work and didn't work. And also to say that gyroscoping games have been pretty big for a while, but they've only been big in Nintendo Wii games and iOS devices. And that's the only two places where they've been huge. But now that gyroscopes are so cheap, and like I've stated in a couple other videos, why hasn't Microsoft put it into their controller? Because it's not really going to add much to the price of those controllers anymore. And as for their Classic Controller Pro for the Wii U, I'm glad that Nintendo's doing something right. Thank God. I don't hate the touchscreen, but I didn't really care for the touchscreen on the pad. But at least we get a secondary controller. I mean, if the touchscreen one's going to be the main controller, at least give us a good secondary controller. And Nintendo's doing that now. Thank you, Nintendo. I at least hope in their controller pro they at least put the gyro and the accelerometer into the pro controller. And of course they put triggers, which proves that, Sony doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, because they don't have triggers on their controllers. They got big old fat buttons that stick out for some fucking reason. By the way, I'm going to put a picture of the new Wii U Classic Controller Pro. The links down at the bottom if I can. And of course, I think they're going to still keep the touchscreen reactive. And they should be able to have cross-game chat. I mean, it's not impossible if all they need is at least a good amount of RAM, at least somewhere past 512 megabytes, and they'll have cross-game chat easily. But most rumors are saying they're going to at least probably have 1 gig of RAM. Some are hoping for 2, but or maybe 715, which is still not that bad. And let's not forget that it was Nintendo who came up with the whole idea of shoulder buttons, and of course the Wiimote had a trigger on the bottom, which was a little bit more effective than what Sony came out with. And of course, that little diamond-like arrangement of their buttons that even Xbox uses, Xbox 360, Sony's PlayStation, all originated from the Super NES. Of course, I still don't know why the analog sticks are on top, but well, I just guess they wanted to one-up Xbox. Of course, them going from the thumbstick controls to the analog sticks, they only did that for the developers, and it's a bit confusing, but it has a lot to do with button configurations, but they, to make it easier for the developers to, go from one console onto another console without having to go through so many rearranging their buttons that much. I mean, yeah, Sony came up with the idea of putting two analog sticks on there, and Microsoft came with the idea of making two extra buttons into triggers. But I don't know. It's pretty much. I think the evolution of the controller's pretty much stopped. The only thing that's going to be added is gyroscoping and accelerometers, mainly because that shit's cheap now and it's not going to really do much, but it can be put in there. Unlike Sony's idea of trying to get out of paying out patents and making their own fucked up version. But yeah, most of this is what I expected from Nintendo, and well, I hope they do good.